He made us laugh. He made us cry. He made us feel alive. So why would someone like Robin Williams choose to die? Most people believed it was depression, but when his widow revealed that he had Lewy Body Dementia, everything changed. Suddenly, the world said, "Ah, now I understand." But what if that understanding is doing more harm than good? Today, we're diving deep, not just into the truth behind Robin's death, but into how we talk about illness, dignity, and the value of every life, even when the mind begins to fade. The truth behind Robin's final days. In the final chapter of his life, Robin Williams was grappling with more than just depression. He was in the grip of a silent and merciless disease called Lewy Body Dementia, DLB. It's a condition many people have never even heard of, and yet it affects more than 1 million Americans. For Robin, it didn't just cloud his thoughts, it stole pieces of him day by day, his memory, his movement, his ability to be fully present in the world he loved so much. DLB is particularly cruel. It's like watching a beautiful painting slowly fade, colors dimming, details slipping away. One moment, you feel yourself, and the next, the world becomes unfamiliar, even frightening. Robin, who had always been so quick-witted, so alive, was beginning to feel like a stranger in his own mind. It was his wife, Susan Schneider Williams, who courageously shed light on what he had endured. In an interview that touched millions, she said, "Lewy Body Dementia killed Robin. That's what took his life." That sentence, so simple, yet so profound, changed everything. It gave the public a clearer picture of what Robin was truly facing. But more importantly, it offered understanding to families around the world who had watched loved ones disappear behind the fog of dementia. Still, this truth isn't just about one man's illness. It's about acknowledging the complexity of suffering, the kind that can't always be seen, the kind that wears a smile while falling apart inside. Robin's legacy shouldn't be rewritten to make sense of our grief. It should remind us that even those who shine the brightest may be struggling in ways we can't comprehend. And yes, that truth matters. It matters for every caregiver who has felt helpless, for every person with DLB who fears becoming invisible, for every voice that has cried out in confusion only to be met with misunderstanding. Robin's story brings dignity to that pain. It tells us you are not alone. You are not forgotten. His final days were not a failure. They were a reflection of a man battling an invisible monster with everything he had. And even in that darkness, Robin gave us a chance to talk about the things we often ignore. The fragility of the mind, the courage it takes to keep going, and the power of telling the truth even when it hurts. Why this new narrative is dangerous. When the truth about Robin Williams' Lewy Body Dementia came out, it felt like the world let out a collective sigh of relief. Now it makes sense, people said. That explains everything. And in some ways, it did. It gave context to the chaos. It softened the sharp edges of confusion. But it also created a dangerous narrative, one that quietly told us, unless there's a clear physical cause, pain doesn't count. That's the message too many people received. That mental illness alone, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, isn't enough to warrant compassion, empathy, or even understanding. That unless your brain is literally dying, your suffering might be an overreaction. That's not just wrong, that's deadly. We've started dividing suffering into categories of legitimacy. Physical illness gets flowers and casseroles. Mental illness gets silence, awkwardness, or worse, blame. When Robin's diagnosis became public, many people used it to retroactively validate his death, as if his struggle only became real the moment it had a biological name we could pronounce. But here's what we're missing. Depression is already a real disease, a life-threatening one. Just because you can't see it on an MRI doesn't make it less lethal. Just because someone smiles through it doesn't mean they're okay. And when we act like only certain illnesses justify suicide, we push those struggling with mental health further into the shadows. We tell them their pain isn't valid unless they can prove it. We increase their shame, their isolation, their silence. And silence can be fatal. This narrative shift from depression to DLB also risks framing death by suicide as the rational choice when faced with a disease like dementia. That's terrifying because it sends a subtle but powerful message. Life with disability confusion or loss of independence isn't worth living. That's not empathy. That's a bias we need to confront. We need to stop trying to make sense of tragedy by putting it into neat little boxes. We need to accept that pain, whether physical, mental, or emotional, is valid. That people deserve support long before they reach a breaking point. And that no diagnosis, no matter how terrible, should be used as shorthand for why someone chose to die. Robin Williams' death wasn't finally explainable because of DLB. It was always a tragedy, but it was also always real, always human, always worthy of compassion. So before we say, now I understand, maybe we need to ask ourselves what we didn't want to understand before and why. Depression is also real and deadly. Depression doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always show up with tears or isolation. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it looks like the life of the party. And sometimes it looks like Robin Williams, a man who made the world laugh while quietly drowning inside. For decades, Robin lived with depression and addiction. He was open about it in interviews, raw and unguarded. He didn't hide his demons, but the world often chose to look past them because it's easier to celebrate the comedian than to acknowledge the man's pain. Depression is a thief. It doesn't just steal joy, it steals perspective. It whispers lies that feel like truths. You're a burden. No one would miss you. You're not enough. And when you hear those lies long enough, they begin to sound like facts. What's so dangerous about how we've reframed Robin's death is that we've erased decades of that very real, very painful struggle, as if it only mattered once we could attach a disease like DLB to it. But depression alone, without any other condition, can and does kill. It's not a weakness. It's not a flaw in character. It's a medical condition, one that requires treatment support and compassion, not dismissal or doubt. We wouldn't wait for someone with cancer to be at stage 4 before offering help. Why do we wait until someone with depression is on the brink? Robin's story should be a wake-up call, not just about dementia, but about depression, about the millions of people who look fine but are not, about the invisible battles happening behind closed doors and behind public smiles. We must stop comparing suffering, stop assigning value to pain based on whether it has a physical symptom or a tragic ending. Start seeing depression for what it is, a silent internal storm that deserves the same urgency, the same funding, the same humanity as any other disease. If you're watching this and you felt the weight of that storm, please know your pain is real. Your struggle matters, and there is help. There is hope. You are not alone. And if you've never known that kind of pain, let Robin's life remind you, not every wound is visible, but every person carrying one deserves to be seen. Life with DLB or depression can still have beauty. It's easy to assume that a diagnosis like DLB or a lifelong struggle with depression means the end of a meaningful life, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Let me introduce you to Michael. He's a retired architect diagnosed with Lewy Body Dementia 3 years ago. Every morning, Michael wakes up, walks to his studio, and paints. His brush strokes aren't as steady as they once were, and sometimes he forgets where he left his palette. But when he paints, he says, "I feel like myself again." Then there's Sarah, a retired teacher in her 60s who has lived with major depressive disorder most of her adult life. She'll tell you it's been hard, some days unbearable. But she also runs a dog rescue. Every week, she drives hours to shelters, gives scared animals a second chance, and trains them to become therapy dogs for children with autism. Michael and Sarah are not outliers. They're reminders that even in the middle of illness, even on the worst days, there can be moments of joy, purpose, laughter, connection. Sometimes those moments are small, like hearing your favorite song on a foggy morning, like the smell of fresh cookies, like a grandchild's giggle, or the feel of the sun on your skin. These aren't just fleeting comforts, they're lifelines. We live in a society that idolizes independence and productivity, but life isn't only about being efficient. It's about being connected, valued, loved, and you don't stop being worthy of that when you're sick. When we frame conditions like DLB or depression as ends, as reasons to give up, we rob people of the truth that life after diagnosis doesn't have to be empty. It can be different, slower, more vulnerable, but also more intentional, and sometimes even more beautiful. We've all heard the phrase, quality of life, but who defines that quality? Is it based on what we can produce or how much we can feel? Is it measured in accomplishments or in moments that move our hearts? I remember sitting beside my mother, who had advanced dementia, while we listened to birds outside her window. She couldn't remember my name that day, but she smiled. She reached for my hand. She hummed a tune she didn't know she remembered. And for a while, we were simply present together. That was a good day, a beautiful one. There is still light in illness, still love, still reason to wake up. And that's a truth just as important as any diagnosis. So let's not reduce someone's worth to their condition. Let's tell stories that honor the whole person, not just the struggle, but the courage, the joy, the resilience too. Because even in darkness, life can still shine. The quiet heroes, family, doctors, and friends. Behind every person living with Lewy Body Dementia or depression is a quiet network of heroes, caregivers, doctors, nurses, neighbors, friends. They don't wear capes, but they show up every day in small and mighty ways. Take Jack, whose wife was diagnosed with DLB 5 years ago. Every morning, He lays out her clothes, labels the drawers, and walks her through their morning routine with patience that never seems to run out. Some days she forgets who he is, but he never forgets who she was and who she still is underneath the fog. Or Dr. Kim, a neurologist in Seattle who spends extra time with her dementia patients, not just explaining the medical facts, but asking, "How are you feeling today?" She knows that healing is not always a cure. Sometimes it's simply being seen. And then there are the friends, the ones who keep calling even when the calls go unanswered, who show up with soup, who don't flinch when things get messy emotionally or otherwise, who say, "I'm here," and mean it. These people are often overlooked in the larger conversation, but they are lifelines, and their love, their steady presence, their refusal to turn away, these are the things that make life livable, even in its hardest seasons. Being a caregiver is not easy. It's exhausting. It can be isolating, and it takes a toll emotionally, physically, spiritually. But it's also an act of profound courage and grace. It's love in motion. It's choosing to walk beside someone when the road gets uncertain. Community matters. Connection matters. When someone is diagnosed with a degenerative disease or faces chronic depression, the instinct can be to pull away, to retreat. But what they need most is the opposite. They need people to lean in, to say, "You're still you, and I'm not going anywhere." There's power in presence. Sometimes we don't need the perfect words or solutions. We just need to be there, a hand to hold, a voice that gently says, "You're not alone." If we want to honor the lives of people like Robin Williams and the millions like him, we must also honor the quiet heroes standing beside them. Because when families, doctors, and communities come together in compassion, they don't just help someone survive, they help them live. Let's tell their stories too. Words matter. Let's speak carefully. In the face of unimaginable pain, the words we use become more than just language. They become a reflection of our values, our compassion, and our understanding. And sometimes, without even realizing it, the words we choose can deepen wounds we cannot see. We used to say, "He committed suicide." It was a phrase whispered behind closed doors, said with a tone of judgment or shame. But today, mental health advocates remind us that this language is not only outdated, it's harmful. Suicide is not a crime. It's not a sin. It's a tragedy. One rooted in pain, in illness, in a struggle too deep for many to articulate. That's why we now say, "died by suicide." It's a small shift in words, but a massive shift in empathy. It moves the conversation from blame to understanding, from condemnation to compassion. The way we talk about mental illness matters too. When we describe someone as crazy or losing it, we strip away their humanity. We make them other. We make them a problem instead of a person. And when we do that, we create silence. We create fear. We make it harder for people to reach out, to speak up, to say, "I'm struggling." Robin Williams was not crazy. He was not weak. He was a brilliant, beautiful soul fighting a battle inside his own mind, one that millions of others face every day. And when we talk about diseases like Lewy Body Dementia, we need to speak with the same care. It's not just memory loss. It's not just getting old. It's a progressive, devastating illness that touches every part of a person's life. When we minimize it, we minimize them. We take away the validity of their experience. Words can heal. They can create bridges where there were walls. They can open doors to conversations that save lives, but only if we choose them with care. So, the next time you talk about suicide or depression or dementia, pause. Ask yourself, am I speaking with empathy, with accuracy, with dignity? Because the words we speak today will shape the stories we tell tomorrow. And those stories, like Robin's, deserve to be told with truth, with heart, and with hope. People with dementia still want to live. There's a dangerous assumption floating just beneath the surface of many conversations about dementia that those who have it must not want to live. That losing memory means losing meaning. That confusion cancels out joy. But that's not true, and it's certainly not fair. People living with dementia still experience love. They still feel connection. They still laugh at jokes and smile at music and find beauty in a bird outside their window. Their moments may be fleeting, but they are real. They matter. Let me tell you about Henry. He's in his late 70s and lives in a memory care facility. Most days he can't tell you what year it is, but when his daughter visits and brings his old jazz records, his face lights up. He taps his fingers to the rhythm. He sings along to lyrics he shouldn't remember. And for a while, he is simply happy. That moment matters. Or Martha, who used to be a school teacher. Now, even though she sometimes forgets the names of her own children, she still beams with pride when she helps a young nurse learn how to fold linens, just like I taught my students, she says. And in that moment, her dignity returns. The truth is, a person with dementia doesn't stop being a person. Their value isn't erased by confusion. Their soul doesn't disappear with their short-term memory. They are still here, still needing love, still capable of giving it. When we talk about dementia only as a horror story, we rob people like Henry and Martha of the respect they deserve. We tell the world that their lives aren't worth living, but they are. And we risk convincing people newly diagnosed, like Robin was, that their future holds nothing but darkness, that they're better off gone, that perhaps we'd understand if they left. But we should never understand that. We should be fighting to give people more good days, more music, more dignity, more connection, more hands to hold and eyes to meet. Life doesn't end at diagnosis. It changes, it shifts, but it still has worth. And when we choose to see that, to honor it, to nurture it, we tell those living with dementia, you are still you. You are still loved. You still belong here. And that message might be the most important thing we can give them. A memory I will never forget. There's a photo I keep on my desk. It's me and my mom in the kitchen. She's wearing her favorite old apron, the one with faded daisies. I'm holding a mixing bowl, and she's laughing. The dough is everywhere on the counter, in our hair on the floor, and she's laughing. That photo was taken during the final year of her life. By then, dementia had taken so much from her. She no longer remembered the names of my children. She sometimes confused me with her sister. But on that day, making chocolate chip cookies, something came back. She didn't know the recipe. She asked me what came next after every step, but she stirred. She tasted the batter. She joked about how messy we were. She licked the spoon like she did when I was 5. For that hour, she wasn't a patient. She wasn't a diagnosis. She was my mom, and I held on to that hour like it was gold, because that's what people don't always see, that even inside the fog, even inside the forgetting, there are glimmers, there are sparks, there is still life. When I look at that photo, I don't see illness. I see joy. I see connection. I see a moment that dementia couldn't take away. And I think of all the families who never get to have that moment, who lose loved ones too soon, either to the illness itself or to the hopelessness it brings. And I think if we could just hold space for these kinds of memories, maybe more people would keep fighting. Maybe more would stay. Robin Williams gave the world so many gifts: laughter, light love. But behind that brilliance was someone quietly breaking. What if in the middle of that darkness, he had one more moment like my mom's, one more spark, one more hour of being fully himself? I wish he had. I wish we all could. So let's keep making space for those memories. Let's create them, celebrate them, protect them. Because sometimes a single hour of being truly seen, truly known, can carry someone for miles. And those memories, they live on, even when everything else fades. What would Robin want us to learn? Robin Williams spent his life giving others joy. He made the world laugh, think, feel. But what if his final gift wasn't a joke or a performance, but a message? What if through his struggle and his silence, he left us an invitation, not to pity, not to judge, but to understand? If Robin could speak to us now, maybe he'd say, don't wait until someone is gone to believe they were hurting. Maybe he'd remind us that pain doesn't always show, that a smile can hide a storm, that those who bring the most light may be the ones battling the deepest darkness. And maybe he'd ask us to stop grading suffering on a scale, to stop asking whether someone was sick enough to deserve compassion. He might tell us to look closer, to listen better, to show up sooner, and above all, to choose empathy, not just when it's easy, not just when it's explained, but always. Robin's story is heartbreaking, but it can also be transformative if we let it be. It can be the reason we check in on a friend who's been quiet. It can be the reason we speak more gently about mental illness. It can be the reason we advocate for better care, better language, better love. Because the truth is, we all have the power to make someone feel less alone, to be the hand they hold in the dark, to be the reason they stay one more day. If we honor Robin's legacy, not only through laughter, but through compassion, if we let his life teach us to see the invisible pain in others, then maybe something beautiful can grow from the heartbreak. Maybe that's what Robin would want most, not understanding for his death, but understanding for others' lives. Let's give him that. What we can do right now. Change starts with us, not with policy or programs, though those matter, but with people, with conversations, with compassion. And it starts with small, intentional choices. We can start by changing how we speak. Say, died by suicide, not committed. Say, lives with dementia, not suffering from. Speak with respect, with care, with accuracy. We can learn, really learn, about mental illness and brain diseases, not from fear-driven headlines, but from real stories, from those living through it, from those loving through it. We can check in on our friends, not just with, how are you, but with, how can I show up for you today? Not just in crisis, but in the everyday moments that slowly shape our lives. We can listen, without rushing to fix, without offering advice, just listening fully patiently with our whole hearts. We can support organizations that are making a difference. Donate if you can. Volunteer. Share their resources. Use your voice to lift theirs. And most of all, we can keep telling stories. Honest ones. Gentle ones. Stories that don't shy away from pain, but also don't forget the beauty that can exist within it. Stories like Robin's. Stories like yours. If something in this video spoke to you, share it. Not for clicks, but because someone somewhere may need to hear that their pain is real, that their life matters, that they are not alone. And if you're struggling right now, please reach out to a friend, a therapist, a hotline, someone, anyone. Let them in. You don't have to walk this road by yourself. Robin's life was a gift. Let's make sure his legacy is too. Let's be gentler. Let's be louder. Let's be there for each other. Because every life, no matter how hard, is still worth living. And every person, no matter how lost, still deserves to be found. You matter. You are loved. And we're not done with you yet.